It's official. The 49ers are set to hire their next defensive coordinator, and I love this move. We're going to talk about potential changes to see on the defense, including schemes, as well as how he might fit into this organization as a whole. And we're going to break that all down for you on this episode of Niners Digest. My name is Ethan Galbraith. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because we noticed 95% of you haven't subscribed yet. It's free to do so, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any Niners updates because we're going to give you everything we got, including everything you need to know about the newest 49ers defensive coordinator. Robert Saleh is gone. He has departed for the Tennessee Titans head coach position, the second time he's left the Niners, but just like last time, the Niners have found a new guy, and he's not an internal candidate. He is actually friends with Kyle Shanahan. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but he is not an internal candidate like some people thought the Niners were going to bring on. It's actually ex-Falcons head coach Raheem Morris. Most recently, he was the ex-Falcons head coach, multiple other positions in the NFL before that. We'll talk about that, but Raheem Morris looks to be the guy. And there were whispers about Gus Bradley as the internal candidate and Jim Schwartz from Cleveland, but I think this is a really good hire for the Niners. And before we get into what Raheem Morris brings to the table for the Niners defense, can we just take a step back and think about how much change this Niners defense has seen in the last 6 years? You saw Saleh leave the first time, D'Amico Ryans left, then it was Steve Wilkes for a year, then it was Nick Sorensen for a year, Robert Saleh again, and now we're moving on to Raheem Morris. Now, that's a lot of change, especially for a defensive unit that has seen some injuries, especially this most recent year, but I think fans should be very excited about what Raheem Morris brings to this organization. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I want to start with how he's unfamiliar maybe to the organization and the Niners fans, but he's not a stranger entirely. As a matter of fact, he is good friends with Kyle Shanahan. As Adam Schefter points out here, they've worked together in multiple different positions. First in Tampa Bay in the mid-2000s, then in Washington, then Atlanta. So the fourth time that Kyle Shanahan and Raheem Morris are working together. So Shanahan's bringing in one of his friends. And I think at first sometimes people might be hesitant about that because do you really want to work with your friends? Because of the professional setting and the drive to want to win a championship in this environment. But I do think this is a really beneficial thing because there's already that established trust between Kyle Shanahan and Raheem Morris. And I think that will play into a positive that we didn't see previously with outside hires. Think Steve Wilkes, for example, in 2023, how he was shown the door after just one season, despite the fact that the Niners made the run all the way to the Super Bowl and their defense overall was pretty impressive throughout that season. And yet he was shown the door. So I think having Raheem Morris here is a good hire. And it's not just because he's friends with Kyle Shanahan, obviously. But I do think that is a plus because, again, you have that established trust already. There's no feeling out period. So that element is, I think, a huge bonus. Another part of it is because Raheem Morris has extensive coaching experience, and David Lombardi kind of lays it out here. The appeal of Raheem Morris is his extensive experience on both sides of the ball. He's not just a defensive mind. Morris was Kyle Shanahan's wide receiver coach for the record-setting 2016 Falcons offense. So Shanahan believes that working on both sides helps the DC attack offenses, and he's right. David Lombardi's right. I think having Raheem Morris come in as somebody who has experience working on the offensive side of the ball is going to be a huge plus. And if you look at this isn't even his entire coaching experience, but this is some notable most recent positions that he's been in the NFL. Obviously, 2 different stints with the Falcons in the mid-2010s, and then most recently as the head coach. Most notably here, he was the defensive coordinator for the LA Rams when they won the Super Bowl in 2021. So this is a man who's been on a team that's won championships. He knows what that feels like. He knows what it takes to get there. And that Rams defense was pretty solid on its own. So I think that's another reason, again, to be excited about this hire. He's a guy who knows what it takes to win. And that's exactly what the Niners need at a crucial time in this franchise and at this time with its star players reaching right around the prime or end of the prime of their careers. So all of that is to say is the man is more than qualified for this position. There's no denying that. Now there's questions about, because the Niners did not hire an internal candidate and they brought somebody else from the outside, what does that mean for schemes. What does that mean for the defense? Well, Raheem Morris does something different. He does run a 3-4, which is a little different than what the Niners have been used to, which is a 4-3 wide 9 technique. So, we're going to talk about that first right here, because I think this is something that people might be skeptical about. Other people might immediately jump to it and say, this is awesome. We need new defensive change. We need a new scheme. And I think that's something to look forward to. That's my point in bringing this up. So here are just a couple of notes, basic notes about the difference between what the Niners have run historically during the Shanahan era, whether it was with Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans, Nick Sorensen, Steve Wilkes. This has been usually the main defense that the Niners have run, and Raheem Morris does not run this. So obviously the main big difference is that the wide 9 uses 4 defensive linemen, whereas a 3-4 uses only 3. 4 linebackers instead. So instead of a Will, Sam, Mike linebacker, there's usually 2 Mikes in a 3-4 defense. So what does that mean? Well, there's a lot more variety that you can run with 4 linebackers instead of 4 defensive linemen. Obviously, defensive linemen are bigger and slower, so you can't use them in multiple different ways like you can with a second Mike linebacker. So that's one part of it. And you can change the fronts. Raheem Morris has been seen to run 5-man fronts with a 3-4 despite only having 3 defensive linemen. So again, you can mix it up a lot. As well as blitzing. I think there's been a lot of concerns about Niners' ability to get to the quarterback, especially after 2025. That would change, ideally, with Raheem Morris's ability to mix it up with frequent blitzing. Historically speaking, that's what he's done. And I put tradition versus modernity at the bottom because the old saying, reject modernity, embrace tradition. No. The Niners have to look for innovation, and that's what Raheem Morris brings. That is, I think, the biggest thing to take away from this signing is that it might be a sign of the changing times in the Niners organization. They've been used to running a wide 9, 4-3 defense for so long. They're bringing Raheem Morris in to maybe run a new defense. At least you hope that would be, because if you didn't want somebody to run a new defense, why would you not just hire internally? But first glance, that might not be immediate. Tom Jensen of Sports Illustrated writes that you shouldn't expect an immediate change to the 3-4. He said, quote, I expect variations on a theme. He's run 3-4, 4-2. Morris is a shapeshifter. I don't expect a hard reset to 3-4. Place less emphasis on the sets and more on the skill sets to foster flexibility. They can transition from wide 9 to 3-4 over time as the personnel allows. I think this is the best way to go about it. I think eventually the end goal should be moving to a 3-4. There's a lot more flexibility there, and the 4-3 just hasn't been good enough. Obviously, defenses for the Niners in the past have been great, and you can chalk 2025's shortcomings up to injuries. I think that's more than fair, but you aren't switching immediately to a 3-4. You can see what works with this scheme, and maybe Raheem Morris likes the wide 9 because of the personnel that the Niners have. Maybe that's the case, but I do think the end goal here should be to switch to a 3-4 because that's what Morris is used to running. And if he's going to be around for multiple years, I think that is going to be a huge plus for this Niners personnel. So now the question shifts to, what does the Niners free agency look like? What does the draft look like if they're going to try and switch to a new defensive scheme? We're going to talk about all of that in the future. But for now, this is what we got. We got Raheem Morris. It looks like we're going to have him as the Niners' next defensive coordinator. And Niners fans should be very excited for this. So that's all for this episode of Niners Digest. We'll keep you updated on potential who the Niners should go after because of this change, any future updates about what the Niners defense is going to look like. But for now, thank you so much for watching. My name is Ethan Galbraith, and we will see you in the next episode.